preference as privilege. This is part of the chapter, a deeper dive into Absolute Femdom negotiation, which is a part of an overall series about Femdom negotiation. One of the most misunderstood dimensions of negotiation, especially in relative Femdom, is the elevation of preference to the status of entitlement. Many submissives are taught, implicitly or explicitly, that their kinks are not only valid but central. They approach the Domina not as a sovereign entity, but as a service provider meant to fulfill a curated list of personal fetishes. This model is structurally reinforced by kink communities that emphasize lists, menus, and detailed play profiles, where erotic compatibility is determined by how well two sets of preferences match. But this logic, while often used in casual and scene-based dynamics, is fundamentally contrary to absolute femdom. Because in absolute dynamics, preferences are not rights. They are curiosities. They are information the Domina may choose to explore, use, ignore, or subvert. The moment a submissive's preference becomes a precondition for his surrender, it ceases to be submission. It becomes negotiation for service. It places the Domina in the role of provider rather than originator, and that undermines the very power dynamic he claims to seek. To be clear, having preferences is not the problem. The problem arises when preference is conflated with consent. When a submissive says, "I only submit under these conditions," he is not surrendering to power. He is brokering access. His so-called submission is contingent on her compliance. And that is not power exchange. That is a service exchange. This is why authentic domination cannot emerge from performative femdom tropes. Because if her power is limited by his desire, it is no longer her power. At the philosophical heart of absolute femdom, the Domina is not a mirror. She does not reflect the submissive's fantasy. She is the source of desire. She writes the frame in which new desires are formed. She is not acting out what her sub knows and wants. She is showing him that he never knew what he could need. Thus, she is the author of domination. So, most newcomers to femdom misread the negotiation process and believe that by stating their boundaries, limits, and preferences, they are building the conditions for surrender. But boundaries and limits are not the structure. They are the safety net that are built into the structure. This is the distinction between relative and absolute femdom. In relative femdom, negotiation is a collaborative architecture. Both parties contribute bricks to building the dynamic. In absolute femdom, negotiation is a threshold. The Domina has already built the house. She is simply deciding who may enter and who is not ready to dwell inside her design. The next installment of this series is Negotiation in Absolute Femdom, Vetting, Not Co-authoring.